I'm going to give you the floor. And why don't you start just very briefly at the beginning, kind of how you started your career, and then that can kind of lead up to where you are today. I think that's important. So maybe if you can kind of go into that a bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Connor. And by the way, man, thank you so much for reaching out, because we don't even know each other. And I got this rogue invite, and it just right from the invite to the first prep conversation, it felt like it was a good idea for you and I to hang out a little bit more. So we'll go back, way back, and coming out of college, like everybody else, I just went to get a real job and things like that. I actually rented a car to a guy in the IT industry who for 9 months kept lining up his ducks. And then finally, after the 9th month, I called the guy that eventually hired me and said, what's up with this dude who keeps telling me to line up my ducks? Is he going to offer me a job or what? And he says, hey, you didn't hear from me, but go get your haircut, clean up your resume, come in here tomorrow and tell him you want the job. And the next day, he'll tell me to hire you. I'm like, okay. Sure enough, that's what happened. So 1985, I get a job in the IT staffing industry, right? I'll pay you $20 an hour, charge the client $30 an hour. I get a cut off the 10, 1985. And so the last 38 years or 40 years, whatever that number is, I've been in the IT services arena. It's been my bread and butter, make my money, and it's been all about people, right? Very rarely have I sold software and hardware and things like that. It's just packaging up people different ways, right? Headhunting, consulting, all that good stuff. And as that journey went along, also in 1985, I needed a part-time job. I wanted to work on the weekends and, maybe meet some women, and get paid on the weekends. And I started this DJ thing with a really cool guy named Jerry Gallagher out of New Jersey, Primetime Entertainers. And then fast forward to 2000, I really missed public speaking. So I'm still in the IT arena. I miss public speaking. I'm coming up the main road here. And I'm like, I think I'm going to start this DJ thing. I come in, I tell my wife, 8 gigs a year, $500 each. That's $4,000. I take $2,000 for tuxedo and equipment. You take $2,000, go on vacation with your girlfriends for watching our kids. And my wife said, get your sorry ass out there. So here I am in 2000, 2001. I'm in the IT industry. Pretty successful career there. I start the DJ thing for public speaking only. And I built that 8 gig a year plan up to 55.
Oh, wow.
And to this day, and I did that for 12 years, and now it's back down to like 30. So I'm still doing about 30 a year. The business plan is still the same. I come home, I give all the money to my wife. She splits it in half. Half goes to the business, half goes to her. But, someday if you're doing that, you're really just paying 529s for college. And, maybe it doesn't hurt to buy a nicer monitor for your computer or something like that. But it really, financially it was great. But someday we'll talk a little more about the other rewards from that. And then last but not least, in 2007, when the economy was tanking because of my recruiting background in the IT services, there's so many of my friends and peers and customers that were getting laid off. They were all looking for jobs. Yeah. And at that time, Connor, what I learned is they didn't know how to find a job. If you were a senior person in the 80s and 90s and coming in 2007, you just got a job through your network. You called your buddies, got a job. So we may talk about this a little bit later, but sure enough, I created a methodology that's about 19 different ways to keep your network alive. Code name, get a new job. And thus was born the domain how to figure out what to do next in life.com. So it's a pro bono thing that I do that it's like 19 things that you should be doing. They're all things by the way. I just put them all together in an order and say, start here, finish there. This is what you measure. And so, there we are. And then the last piece, as we bring it to the current day, this is where you and I got connected. I just came out of like a great experience of about 7, almost 8 years in an ecosystem called Salesforce, which is incredibly rewarding. And I just found myself at a place where I needed to do something else. And lo and behold, some of the crazy ideas I have about later in life. And oh, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're younger, just because I'm experiencing this feeling and all this at an older age doesn't mean you can't consider this at a younger age. I think one of the main things from today is there might be a different way we can all work for folks. I now find myself in a situation as the owner of a company called Fractional C-Suite. It is SWEET. SUIT was taken, SUITE. And so conceptually, think of it this way. We're going to change the way that we work for folks. People may still want to pay you a salary. They may want to pay you contingent. They may want to pay you hourly. But if we have an agreement that what you're delivering every day, every week, every month, every year, it meets or exceeds their expectations for what you're getting paid, is it okay if I do a few other things? And what's really important here is being above board about it. Because in the traditional world, it's called moonlighting. So you're not allowed to do that, Connor. You know, you're working for the man, so to speak, and out loud. So that's where I find myself. I found a couple of leaders of organizations who said, hey, we love the idea. It doesn't matter how we pay you. We love the transparency. And oh, by the way, what comes with that transparency is shared intellectual property and shared potential customers, right? The three streams of services are executive coaching, generative AI, and then a CISO CIO security play. Well, many, many times when you're in talking to somebody about generative AI, one of the things that's not really thought about as much, because we all want to talk about the sexy stuff, is what's the security mean? Well, the organizations I'm working with right now lead with AI, but have a security intersection there that makes it beneficial to both. Why not have that all be above board?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
So that's where I am now, man. I got, I've haphazardly, I'd love to tell you I was a serial entrepreneur. That'd be really cool, right? But I've kind of haphazardly backed into 5 things, right? Fractional C-Suite with its 3. Just for fun, DJing, still spinning tunes, doing a wedding. And then this pro bono coaching, for people who are freaking out about not wanting to be an accountant for the next 20 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And so I think there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we can back up and just briefly touch on the DJing stuff, because you're saying you're doing 50 gigs a year, which was a lot more than I had expected. And so I think my question is just generally for somebody that feels like they can't do more. I mean, how are you working in IT, consulting and staffing, and also DJing, and also being married, among other things, right? Like how do you juggle multiple things?
Yeah, great question. So 2 sticky things come to mind, and then one warm and fuzzy thing, right? The 2 sticky things are time management. I mean, I am deliberate about what's important to me every day. I'm deliberate about what my A priorities are versus my B. And so I'm a real stickler for coming up with ways to make sure I manage my time efficiently. One example is in the DJ side, the 5 hours that I have to do a wedding on a Saturday is actually about 10. So, your Saturday's gone. But there's an hour here, an hour there, a year prior. And then there are hours prior to the wedding that are important, an hour, not 10 or whatever. And I'm a stickler about making sure that they're done at certain times. So they allow for delays, they allow for some disaster recovery, even in preparation, not just the day of the event. So time management's one. You got to get really good with your time. Number 2 is communication, right? You mentioned I'm also a husband and a dad. So making sure that very often I check in with my wife, Rebecca. Hey, how we doing with all this? And there was one time during the growth of the DJ business where she said, I'm not doing so well. It's too much. It's breaking, you know? And so having regular times, and my wife and I actually spend every Friday morning, ironically at around this time, 9 to 10. And we spend every Friday morning talking about our relationship. It often starts, the first 10 minutes are really nice to get the to-dos for the weekend out of the way. But we just spend the rest of that time on how are we doing. So time management's 1, communication is 2. And the third one is you better love those other things that you're doing. If you don't love them, in the DJ business, for example, you have to want to be there. It's not just about pushing buttons and playing music. There are many, many stories of disasters that occurred. And a lot of people would be scared and want to run away. Like, you have to lean into those. You have to want to be there. The how to figure out what to do next in life. I don't charge for that. That's an hour here, hour there, whatever. But I really want to do it, right? It doesn't feel like it's about the money. So we hear this often. If you love it and you get your rewards from it, it's not really about being busy or hours in a day or hours in a week. It's really not.
So how do you know that you love DJing, for example, or the career coaching? What is it specifically about it?
So I think if I gave you like a really deep 10-item list on how to do that would make me really smart, right? But it will stay with that theme of haphazard, right? I know that if I was listening to this, I'd much rather hear somebody who did it haphazardly, because I think most of us feel like that's how things happen in our lives, as much as they're planned. There's really only one question, man. It really is simple. I sit down, and I guess I would call it a meditation time. I try and isolate and just be with my own thoughts. And all I do is I fantasize not doing it. So every year I sit down in December with the DJ business. I do have a guy that I work with who's 80 years old. He's incredible. Wow. I met him when he was 63, 17 years. He still does 35 gigs a year, 30 gigs a year. So I do get his input, but I sit down and I say, okay, 2024, I don't DJ. That's it. What's that look like? The word that comes up? Unhappy. How to figure out what to do next in life. If I shut that down, man, and someone calls and says, we don't know each other, but I'm an engineer at this company and I always want to be an artist. Someone told me you could help me. But I don't know how to help you become an artist or what it takes really to be an engineer. What I do know is there's a way to organize your plan and your thoughts and your activities to see if that's feasible, right? I think about not doing that. I'm like, not happy. So the secret sauce, dude, is I just ask him, I fantasize not doing it. It's that simple.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's important to be intentional or think through decisions, right? And I think this is interesting too. So maybe we can talk about how you kind of fell into your career in IT, but yet you have this consulting or coaching practice about telling people how to kind of find the job of their dreams. So when you look back at your career, do you ever have regrets about going into IT, or did it end up being a good move? Or I just feel like when myself included, when someone say graduates college, they kind of just fall into an industry and then you can end up running with it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But do you have any, do you ever reflect on that and kind of the path you took?
I reflect on that often. The insecure side of me says, oh, thank God I fell into a career that paid really well and was well respected and made a good buck. But if I really go back and think about like how that happened, it wasn't as much intentional from a career path as much as it was intentional to always be open to explore what else is out there. And I'll give you two things that really were the foundation there. The first one is when I first got out of college, needed a job. I had worked at a hotel doing room service all during college and high school. And my buddy's like, hey, man, you want to come work here? You can get this full-time job, work 6 to 2 every day, make more money than my buddies who were all going into banking and all that. Still play softball, bartend, I was younger. And at the end of the first year, full-time, killing myself doing room service at a hotel, making a lot of money. I remember my friend coming up to me, and I used to handle all the banquets, right? So the insurance agents were in and the retailers were here. So I met a lot of people. He puts his arms around me and he goes, isn't this the greatest job? You come in at 6, you go home at 2, nothing to worry about. And I looked right at him and I said, Jake, he was the best man at my wedding. I said, you know what I've learned in a year? There's always 20 ways to work as hard and make twice as much money, or work half as hard and make the same amount of money. So that was an eye-opening, that 1 year of doing coffee and donuts for police and insurance agents and all that, going, wait a second. And the second thing was, when I got into the IT business, I was asked to speak to a bunch of young kids coming out of college, high school and college. And Connor, I'm not sure of the statistics, but what's really interesting is that a vast majority of younger people just do what people in their family do or what everybody tells them what to do. It's still a tremendous number. Like, why are you an engineer? My uncle's an engineer. My dad's an engineer. I'd be an engineer. So there is a hole early on, younger in age, where we don't do, I think they do a better job today, but I think in general, we don't do a really great job with younger folks saying, hey, Connor, you like math. You're not really that good at it. So you don't want to be an accountant. You can sing. You're really good at it. Maybe you ought to think twice about ditching that music career, right? I mean, I don't think we do enough with that. So as I reflect, on the surface, it does look like luck. But my first real job was in the insurance agency car replacement business. So you get in an accident.
Okay.
You get a rental car. And my guy that got me into the industry, I rented a car to him. And he's like, hey, how much outside sales experience do you have? This is what I was mentioning earlier. 9 months, I chased this guy that I rented a car to. It's even how I met my wife. I rented a car to my wife. Like, come on. And so was it luck? Was it hard work? I'd love again to say that I had a lot of vision. I had some coaching along the way, but I reflect back and I feel very fortunate in that I kept an open mind and that I was willing to take some risk.
So what do you recommend? Sounds like you've spoken to young people that have just graduated college. What do you recommend? What's the first step they can do when thinking about a career to kind of avoid falling into something that they're maybe not so excited about?
I think there are two first steps. And this I realized, my kids are in their 20s. This I realized as a product of their generation that right or wrong, I felt I raised them to have purpose and to accept the standard of living that comes with that desired purpose.
Okay.
What happened to kids from the 90s and early 2000s was, I just want you to be happy. And they both sound like cool things that you'd want to hear from your parents. Mm-hmm. The challenge I have with the second one is, if happy is working 3 jobs, living in the garage apartment outside of mom and dad's home and having a long weekend, at the local casino as your vacation, cool.
Yeah.
But if you want the McMansion and the 5 acres and the dogs and you want to travel the world, there are different careers where you have to find a passion to offer you that. So that's number one, is try and understand what kind of lifestyle you want that would make you happy. It's really interesting because my kids, are two extremes, right? One's more of a minimalist, keep it simple. The other one's more of like a more traditional, capitalist, acquire assets. And probably when that one child is older, going to say, oh, I figured it out. I don't want all those things, but who knows?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, great question, Connor. And I don't part of your question. The second thing is, we have to have better resources to educate us on what those paths look like. One of the fascinations I have, it's going to sound crazy, but I've always been fascinated by automobile tires. Right? Sounds crazy, right? They're round, they're black, they have tread on them. Different sizes. But I was a kid, I just would look at the wheels, and say, like, why does it look like this? Why is it like that? Well, tonight, and even right now, someone's at a cocktail party saying, I'm a structural engineer for Goodyear.
Yeah.
I'm a marketing expert for Pirelli. So there are people who love tires. But, no one ever coached me on, well, if you're really fascinated with tires and you're good at math, here's 4 careers that might be of interest. And here's what they offer you. They offer you travel. They offer you independence. They offer you a lot of money. What are those things? To this day, I'm not so sure what all those jobs offer. So number one is embrace a belief that Happy is waking up with a purpose and accepting the standard of living that comes with that purpose. And then number 2 is get educated on what those careers do to feed those 2 things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think you fill that gap, right? You in your consulting or your coaching, you do a lot of that, right? You coach people on finding that balance. And then I want to ask you, because I just had this thought, right? Is that you graduate from high school, you go to college, you leave college, you get a job. I mean, do you think some of the onus or responsibility is on the universities? And I think you made a really good point, right? Like, at a university, you're likely not going to meet a structural or engineer from Goodyear. A lot of it is frankly unrelated to landing that career or learning more about careers. So, I mean, where's the gap, or why aren't people getting the exposure they need?
Yeah, I think that, man, that's something that really hits home with me. My experience, right, very anecdotal, right? It's my own experience, and then my experience with my kids and the kids. I've been in my community for 25 years, and I'm very fortunate to be in a community where the high school and the education system is literally ranked top 10% in Pennsylvania, top 20% in the country, public school.
Mm-hmm.
So in our community, you send your kid through the front doors, and they've got literally a 98% chance that they're going to go to college. And if you look at the statistics, they're mind blowing. I mean, the resume of the high school of who's a Rhodes Scholar and who sees some of the top schools in the country as their fallback schools is amazing. And I'm guessing, I'm saying yes to your question. I think it is a little bit more on the high schools and the universities, because I think they do a really good job of showing the stats of things that people accomplished, right? They went to this school and became an engineer, but there are no statistics that the high schools and universities collect to say, do you wake up every day with a purpose? Are you happy with the standard of living that comes with that purpose? I think it's because the numbers wouldn't be so great. I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm saying I just don't think the numbers would be that great, right?
Yeah.
And so 98% of people graduate, but 8 years later, 71% are happy with the purpose and standard of living they're getting from their career choices. That does, like, in high school, a C minus is not good, right? So yeah, I think some of it is on them. Again, my anecdotal experience, I would say, though, in general, I don't really witness many younger folks feeling like they were coached a lot that way, which is why How to Figure Out What to Do Next in Life surfaces those things. I always want to be an artist. I always want to be this, right? There's a lot of people who have these things they've just suppressed for a long time. And one of the secret sauces, of course, is, well, you don't have to just drop your career, which is affording you a nice living, and shift to a new career. You can do it part-time on the side, things like that. So yeah, good question about is it on them? If I had the time, that's probably another place where I'd like to start a new gig, which is coaching somebody, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 to about 25 on, some of the same concepts that I use for How to Figure Out What to Do Next in Life, which is typically for older people. Usually it's older, like people, okay, 35 kind of thing.
And I'm just curious, who is your typical client? Like, I'm thinking through this, and I'm wondering if you run across a lot of people that went to some sort of graduate schooling, right? Like, I think you mentioned to become an accountant or a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer, right? And you have to take on 2-4 years of extra schooling, more for a doctor. You take on all this debt, and then you graduate and you actually do the job. And you kind of, I'm just wondering if you've run into people that say, crap, I'm in all this debt, but I don't like being a lawyer. So what do I do now? Does that happen?
Great question, man. I don't know that, and I suspect that I've encountered a few folks like that. It's mostly, instead of being a younger person with 150 or 200 grand of student debt, it's an older person, okay, who, based upon whatever debt they have, can't afford to just walk away and change.
Got it.
Right. And for what I do on how to figure out what to do next in life, it's not a short-term thing, right? It's not like, hey, we're going to do this in 3 months. If it's about, getting a new job or being in a better position at your current job, that minimum is at least 6 months. So it's really interesting that question you asked, because I can't say that I've had financial woes be a big part of it. I have had one conversation with a young man who went to a school that was, it's $250,000, no matter how you look at it, to walk in and out the doors. And we talked a little bit about what to do next in life. And I said, tell me about how you feel about that college? It happened to be one that my daughter was interested in. And he said, Mr. Griffith, I thank my parents for their $250,000 investment every day.
Yeah.
So I've had one experience where the dude was like, well, if I bail on this, it's all on my parents. But interesting question,
Totally.
man. I mean, that would be something that'd be, it'd be a sensitive situation. But if someone were to reach out to me and need help with that, I'd love to see how I might be able to help that person.
Okay. Yeah. And then I'm just curious your opinion too. Do you recommend that young people, because I think this is also a big decision, go in to that huge amount of debt just to get a 4-year college degree, a bachelor's degree? Or I mean, how do you approach that, right? Because I think you talked earlier about having the lifestyle you want. If you graduate your 4-year degree and you get a $60,000 to $70,000 job and you have $80,000 in debt, I mean, how do you ever make your way to getting that lifestyle you want? If you're, how can you buy a home if you're in all that debt? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, this is awesome stuff, man. It's I think where I'm at somewhat of I guess that's depends how we look at it, right? Advantage or disadvantage is my generation grew up a little bit differently, right? When you were buying a home in the 80s, it really was a lot easier to afford it, regardless of your debt from school. Back in the 80s, it would be, if you buy this house, you will get 7x your equity. I'm sorry, double your equity in 7 years. People just knew you bought a house for 100, in 7 years it'd be worth 200. You just knew.
Yeah.
In the 90s, it was, if you take this job for X, work there for 3 years, you'll get 20% more in your next job. We didn't know back then that was very predictable. We didn't know that. That's just what we thought the world worked. And that's what I did, right? I bought a home, doubled my equity, bought another home, doubled my equity, had a job, left after 3 years, got 20 grand more, whatever it might be. It's not like that for people like you, your generation, some of the kids coming up. The effort, the money, the financial resources, the time and all that are exponentially more. So I think to your point, probably another thing, right, that we need to get more educated on and get in front of is, what is the ROI on that education? I sense that we're about at a tipping point. I know that my oldest got into, the typical, went to this great school, got into 5 schools, 2 were astronomical in cost. One was middle of the road, and one was really cheap, and but a good school, all good schools. So I guess that was 4. And my daughter comes down and says, I'm going to go to the middle road school, which means she's going to have some skin in the game versus the expensive ones where you're in debt. Yeah. And the cheap one. And I walked her out as she said, I'm going to the middle of the road school, and said, are you sure? Because I will write you a check. No kidding, dude. I will write you a check for $25,000 when you graduate if you go to the cheaper school. Because that tuition plus 25 was cheaper than the middle of the road school.
That's crazy.
Now, my daughter would say probably, hey, if I could do it over again, right? If I actually spent more time, I might have done that. She loved her experience, got a great degree, has a great career. But you're right, that was the scenario. But that was on a whim, dude. So I think today you have to do the ROI, right? Is a 4-year degree from here at $80K debt to make an $80K salary, is that worth it, right? Versus other alternatives. And we didn't even touch on non-college. I've completely changed my view on that, which is, wow, man, the careers in construction and blue-collar stuff, like being a mason, right? Some of those blue-collar skills, I mean, they are really, really short these days. and you can make a nice income doing that. And a lot of the reason people don't go into that is the stereotype, right? It's just a stereotype that, oh, you just lay bricks. I'm like, let me tell you something. That's an awesome skill to be able to do that.
Yeah. And there's demand. There's so much demand, right? And I think it kind of comes back to like when you're 18, you mentioned this earlier, that you take direction from those around you. And I mean, you just don't really know. You're like, okay, if I decide to become an electrician, I hear it's a good job, but I don't know what my life is going to be like if I follow that path. I mean, it's a big decision when you're 18 and you don't know left from right.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge decision. And you and I aren't sitting here saying, oh, you need to find a way to figure it all out in the 2 years in high school, 4 years of college, or wherever and then the next 6 years. I mean, I'm a really great example of, I don't even think I figured it out. Every time I do something different, I'm like, oh, I figured it out, right? And then I'm like, oh, okay. But I do think that we just need to do a better job of educating folks on what's out there, right? Just on what's out there. These are your options. There's plenty of motivational speakers, and most of which I believe in. The old adage of you really can do anything you want to do. I believe those things are true. I think at the core, though, you have to really understand yourself, right? I mean, what is it about you that makes a difference in the world? What skills do you have that you're good at? What skills do you have that you like? And which ones match? You're looking at a guy right here. At 14, you would never think that I could get on a camera and talk to some guy, because I was a mama's boy wuss, man. Say the wrong thing, I'd go in the corner and have to cry. Yeah. But I really worked on that skill. And then someone in 12th grade said, you should go out for the play. So here's this really shy, introverted kid, who was really good and studious and could play some sports. I go out for the play, and I'm looking at the bottom of the page. Back then, Connor, everything was on a piece of paper, right? So you walk with your classmates, and I'm looking at the bottom with my buddy. We just wanted to be on we heard that you could drink beer and make out with chicks if you got in the play. Yeah. And so we go up to the board. I'm like, I don't see our names at the bottom. This is my buddy Joe and I. And we look, and all the way at the top, I got the lead, and he got the second lead. And so, if you would ask me at 14, do you want to be a public speaker? And no, I'm like, well, no way. But somebody, the teacher, she saw something. And I tried to walk away from that gig, dude. And she would not let me. I go, I just want a small part. She goes, nope, you're not doing it. Is that, is that purposeful? Is that luck? I don't know. That's, I'm very fortunate, to have a handful of experiences like that where people bumped into me and guided me through some other decisions. Staying with that theme of haphazard, which I know you and I both appreciate. I don't want to talk about being a visionary. That's too easy.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the haphazardness. And I kind of want to go back to the how to know what to do next in your life from your perspective. If I recall correctly, you said earlier that you do not charge for that. So is this just something you're coaching, you're doing out of the goodness of your heart? I mean, is it a business from your perspective?
Yeah, it is a real business. The decision to not charge is more of a, I still struggle with, is it spiritual? Is it more religious? Or is it just make sense? The make sense piece is I went to go watch a motivational speaker once who said, the reason motivational speaking is so cool is you never have to explain anything new. You just have to remind people what they should be doing. I'm like, oh, that's for me. I don't have to build anything or whatever. Yeah. So there's a little bit of business sense there, because I didn't want to have to invest my time and meet with people and then charge them and then have them decide that was it worth it. And frankly, it was in that 2007 time frame when everybody was getting laid off. And my buddy was telling me, these guys are all getting laid off, and gals, can you help them? Well, I don't know how to help them, but I would sit down and start offering this. So it was making really good context and discussion for a cup of coffee, or like, I need a job, rather than give me a resume, I'll do my best. So I showed them this methodology. And yeah, in the end, man, it's not about the money right now. It's about some things in life, right, are lead with generosity, passion. My asks, by the way, are not monetary. My asks are two things. If I were coaching you, what'll happen is, most times like, wow, this is really awesome. You've made sense of things that I always knew I should do. What do you need from me? One, pay it forward. You promise me that the next person who struggles, you meet with them, you go through my document, you do whatever you learn, and you pay it forward. Like, I can do that. And what most people say to me is, you're going to be my number one partner when I get a new job. I'm like, Connor, that is way too much to ask of you. That's impossible. What I tell them is, if you have a problem at work, call the person you know that can solve it. Yeah. Then call the second person, which is the new person you just met who you think you can solve it. And lastly, all I want from you is make me the third phone call. If you make me the third call, I'm going to raise my hand and say, I think I can solve your problem. Can you pay me to do that? But if I can't, here's one more name who I think could solve the problem. So if you make me the last call, I promise I won't be the last call. That make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the motivation, right, is that it builds your network. It builds trust. It gives you a contact in the future. Like you said, haphazard is kind of the theme. You never know when you may need a connection in X industry, and then they will recall, hey, Joe helped me out for free. He got me where I am. I'll help him out. So is that kind of the thinking as well? A little bit of an ulterior motive.
In the spirit of haphazard, now that you're articulating it that way, I'm like, oh yeah, like if I had already figured that out like 20 years ago, I could have a real nice little package, right? But yeah, that's kind of how it's come to fruition, man. Is it's not always about money. It's not all, lead with generosity, lead with kindness. It all sounds cliche, right? I mean, do the right thing. But yeah, so here I am in my life where all of a sudden, by design or haphazardly, people are coming back into my life saying, hey, I'm trying to figure out what to do next. What are you doing? I'm looking for something fractional. I go, oh my gosh, I'm starting this fractional thing. Yeah. Hey, remember me? I met you at a wedding. I want to DJ. I'm like, oh, like the DJ thing. Or sometimes what is really cool, man, is, hey, remember me? You coached me on how to figure out what to do next in life. I want to let you know that I'm in a better situation at work with my boss, the CEO. I'm like, oh, so you didn't change career. No, I'm still the head of an engineering firm. But I do want to tell you that I teach art part-time at the local college. Remember, part of our discussion is I really missed art, and at the day job of the engineers, he couldn't really get any kind of reward or happy feeling or arguably money from being an artist. And so when I get those calls, man, those are the real rocking ones that make my day.
Yeah, and then maybe really quick, just wrap up with this thought, because I think another way to look at it is I heard online from somebody that goodwill compounds kind of exponentially, right? If you have a good reputation, or one person that you've helped tells two friends, they tell two friends. I mean, that's how you can really expand and grow a business or a network. So I think that might be part of it as well.
Yeah, I just started listening to David Meltzer. David Meltzer, as I understand it, was part of the whole Show Me the Money thing, and had a real successful sports agency business back in the day. And he talks a lot about that, right? The whole 1% improvement per day compounds.
Yeah.
So when I think a lot of us see that like with exercise, right? Working out for an hour one day is not a big deal, but if you work out for an hour religiously, 3 days a week for a year, that makes a difference. It does compound. So yeah, really good analogy, and love the themes we're going with, dude. And if it's okay with you, I love the haphazardness of it. I think it's it's interesting to me to not have it be so prescriptive.
Yeah, 100%. But just keep that in mind. I do actually want to pivot, right? And I think it fits with kind of what we're talking about, like how now you're running fractional C-suite. And I think, again, to people watching, maybe people that are younger that are watching this, and they say, hey, Joe, that's great for you. You're running your own company now, but I'm not you. I don't have the experience or skills to be a fractional CIO or run my own fractional company. So what do you have to people that say that, or how do you get to the point where you are in today? If you're looking back on your younger self working at Salesforce or at IT staffing, because I kind of had that struggle in my career. Like you'd look up at the VP of the company that you're working for and you'd be like, wow, I'll never be like him. I can't believe he runs the whole show. Like, how do you go from being that lower level employee to where you are today, for example?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, as I reflect, two things come to mind, actually. One is very much from a psychological perspective. There are a few concepts in psychology. One is called giving away the power. It's very common for somebody who's more junior, have the boss come to him or her, say, "Hey, great job on that." Not feel that it's justified. You know, there might have been some other people on your team that did a little bit more work, or in your eyes, better work, and to say, "Well, it wasn't really me; it was these people." And then there's people. You give the power to the other folks, and so that could be self-fulfilling, right? Which is not being comfortable bragging about yourself, then accepting your successes. And for me, that's certainly, speaking of compounding, that added up over time. And I would tell you that I was one of those folks. I was climbing the ladder due to seniority, but I was often giving away the power, all the merit, right, to other folks. So I think if I had to go back, I'd be like, yeah, man, it's okay to accept those thank yous and then ask for something in return for that hard work. Easier said than done. And let's just say I didn't do all that myself. So lesson number one is, I heard this a while ago. If you were an athlete and you're trying to get better, you have coaches 24/7. If you're an actor, you have coaches 24/7. But one of the things we don't do in the general work world is we don't have coaches. So if you're younger, it doesn't matter really, but you always need to have a coach, right? You always need to have somebody who, and here's something I just heard the other day. You always want to have somebody who's way older, right? Their wisdom and all that. But remember, if they're way older, circumstances might have been different. Find somebody who's like 3-4 years older, 5 years older, and maybe one step ahead of you, and spend some time with them and say, how'd you get there? Because that's really my second point, which is the cliche of like one bite at a time. I think if you look at yourself as a more junior person, whatever that role might be, and like, how am I ever going to be the senior vice president? That'd be intimidating for me too. But if you set your goal to say, at the end of this year, I'm going to be the best junior person, and you hang out with somebody who's a half a step ahead of you, then the next year it's, well, I'm going to get promoted to be, a middle person, and then hang out with somebody a little more senior, and et cetera. And to me, that's how I think psychologically, and both from a mentoring perspective, that's how I would look to address that. But that's a big issue, man, because I think a lot of it is this perception that it can't be me. Make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I want to see if this resonates with you at all, because something I've started to realize is that when you first start or you look at that senior VP, you kind of think, oh, they're special. I'm not like them. But then what I've kind of realized as I've continued in my career is that they really aren't special. They've just, like you've said, outlasted or have the experience that you don't, but that you're obtaining. I don't know. Does that resonate at all? Like, if you put them on a pedestal, yeah, it looks like it's unachievable. But if you realize they're a person just like you, it allows you to take those small steps forward.
That resonates through and through. I think back early in my career, in that spirit of giving away the power, I would meet, I'd be the top performing salesperson, but I would meet the new SVP of the company that acquired us and say, oh my gosh, he or she must be way better than me. And I'd give too much respect and too much this and too much that, and I really wouldn't be myself, right? And then I'd realize 3, 4, 5 months later, oh wow, they are really good, but they're not way better than me.
Yeah.
And so again, a lot of that was right giving away the power. There's a whole concept of the imposter syndrome. These are all like real deals. And as I reflect, I mean, some of the coolest people I've ever worked with. I mean, really, really cool, insightful people. I'm like, holy smokes, he was only 2 years older than me. He was the CEO and I was just the sales guy. Well, now that I talk to that guy, he's like, I don't know where you ever thought that, man. He goes, I was the boss, but I looked up to you as much as you looked up to me. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Like, well, you're the CEO. He's like, what does that matter? Right? You are another person who I really respected for your work ethic and your creativity and your, whatever that might be that I brought to the table. So, really good question. We get caught up a lot in those titles. They still are very much related to compensation. So I don't think they're going away for a while. And I think that I think the summary there was, that's a little bit of imposter syndrome that goes on. And to me, it's get a hold of your mentor, spend a couple bucks on a coach. I know a couple really good imposter syndrome coaches, and and it's about getting that education, man. It's don't think that you have to just figure it out on your own. These are not easy things to overcome.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to summarize it. And so now I kind of want to keep moving in your trajectory. How did you know you had success in what sounds like the corporate world, IT staffing, Salesforce, et cetera? How did you know it's like, okay, I'm going to step out and I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to be, I know you don't like this word, but entrepreneur and start fractional C-suite. How did you know it was the right time to do that?
Wow, that's thanks for asking, because this is still fairly new for me. Now, I did own a business from 07 to 13 with 3 of my best friends. So the economy was tanking and the 4 of us owned the business. And, every dollar that went out the door, I was responsible for sending the invoice, collecting the money and all that stuff. So we've got that. And then the DJ business is a little bit of a, because the money's not as critical, it's more of an incubator for crazy ideas. But but Fractional is really, really something I think from the day job. It's my thing, not 3 buddies and all that. And Connor, I think I'm going to have to tell you that that answer is incomplete as to how did I know. Here's why.
Okay.
A certain part of my career, I was whatever, I was chameleonizing to be what everybody else wanted me to be. So I found a way to be the top performer around the globe for 5 years. I found a way to be the top performing office gross margin for so years. So all those labels that people in my world, where it's all about generating revenue and growth and all that, and how we get recognized.
Yeah.
But I was never really happy with that, right? We talked earlier about waking up with a passion and a purpose and all that, and a standard of living. Well, the standard of living was being met. It's great. It's very rewarding. But something was missing. And then in 01, I got a gig working for a really good friend of mine. And it was the first time I felt like I was able to be myself, right? And what happened is I realized I could be more of myself. I could do things my way and still be a top performer. It was really tough for me. I felt like I had to do it their way and sacrifice being myself. That was the only way to do it. And so now I think you and I should chat 6 months or a year from now. I think what's going to happen is I'm going to take all the good stuff from focus closest to the money and execute every day and get 1% better every day, right? Some of those more traditional things, and say, and don't lose sight. And this is a core competency of Fractional C-Suite I'm going to hold on to for dear life, dude. Don't lose sight that everybody must have a high EQ that you work with, not a high IQ. Yeah. Because I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But surround yourself with people who genuinely care, lead with generosity, do the right thing, follow through, do what they say they're going to do, etc. And to me, to be honest with you, man, when people turn around and go, well, why were you so successful? I used to struggle because I'm like, oh, I'm not the best here. I'm not the best there. I'm like, I work really hard. I just do what I say I'm going to do. I raise my hand when I make a mistake. Like, does that sound like something cool that you should pay me all this money for? I used to always feel like that they wouldn't want to pay me for that. right? They wanted to know like
Yeah.
8 ways to turn $1 million deal into 2. 4 ways to take a $5 million deal over 6 months and get it closed in 3. How'd you do that? Well, I did some of those things, but I
Yeah.
could never come up with a tangible, traditional methodology or plan as to how I did that.
Mhm.
It was always way too more warm and fuzzy. And oftentimes it felt like luck. And then I just spent a lot of time thinking about, well, why is that? And that kind of leads to maybe the EQ thing that I think 6 months to a year from now, I'm going to tell you, hey, we're really making a lot of money, but to be honest with you, it all starts with EQ. If they get it, then they're in. If not, move on.
And can you clarify EQ? I'm assuming it's like emotional intelligence,
Yeah,
kind of,
emotional
or
quotient, right? So
emotional quotient.
how self-aware are you of yourself? How self-aware are you of others? It's an interesting conversation about finding the balance, you know, in a situation where you want to sell a service or do something or make some money. And you and I have been trained, you know, get into the customer's head, not your own.
Yeah.
How do we say, hey, we're in a room with 15 people or 8 people or 3 people? What are their personal wins, you know, based upon their role? What are the kind of things that would be important to them? And how do you find a way to balance those with yours, right?
Hmm.
To that, if you can understand that, then there might be a way that you can work together. Today, what we do is we say, what's your problem? Here's my stuff. What's your problem? Here's my stuff. Does it work? And then we find out later, oh, they're a great customer. Well, why is that? Well, they see the world the way that I do, culturally or this way, that way. Like, oh, wow, that's not really why we acquired that relationship, because we were leading
Yeah.
with the features and benefits and all those kinds of things. But it's really interesting. If you can hold back, it's why I wanted to talk to you, man. You and I didn't
Hmm.
even know each other. If you don't think that I was getting on that first call going, does this dude really care about this podcast video thing? Does he
Yeah.
genuinely care? You did tell me you want to monetize it.
Yeah. That's fair.
But my first few minutes was all about, is this guy legit? Is he authentic? You know,
Hmm.
does he really want to do this? You told me, I think you do most of these gigs early in the morning before
Yep.
your regular job. So you're honoring that commitment to your regular job and you're investing that time and effort to do something you're passionate about. If you don't think I was trying to flush that out early on,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an
Yeah.
interesting way to look at it, right? Because I wasn't thinking about that, like, is he trying to flesh me out? But so it sounds like you have a pretty intentional process when you're meeting with potential clients or relationships from the fractional C-suite side.
Yeah, it's a good word because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to
Hmm.
be intentional. It's not easy every day to stick to it intentional. We get some shiny lights, Hey, here's a lot of money, but you don't need to be intentional, and you don't really have to care about what's important to them. But here, go get the money. That happens.
Yeah.
But I was just reviewing with a dear friend of mine, Toby, who's been a friend for, I guess, 5, 6, 7 years now, and discussing what I'm doing. And he did use the word intentional. He did say that it sounds like what you're doing is very intentional. And I would say, yeah, man, if intentional can be defined first as finding people that get it,
Yeah.
then say, yo, these are the cool things I'm doing. And if they say, great, it's in my wheelhouse, awesome, I'd love to talk to you more, great. If not, hey, just another really cool relationship that we built.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think it's interesting. So, I mean, I'm definitely learning a lot. And then one other question I want to ask is fractional, right? Fractional C-suite. So you are a part-time employee or a per diem consultant for multiple different types of companies at once. Can you speak to what that means from like, do you think that's going to change how we work in the future?
Yeah, I think we had touched on this earlier. I think it might, man. I have to go back and check my history. But there was a book in the 80s that talked about the revolution from everybody being a 30-year employee working for one company, And when I started my career in the mid 80s, I was at the back end of that. I saw the people getting laid off after 22 years, and I saw the temp worker come up to be. So the whole, don't make 35K, pay you $35 an hour kind of thing. I saw the temp world come around, and
Yeah.
I, maybe it's a little bit self-serving, but there are some pockets where we're seeing those changes. My situation specifically, right? I have 3 organizations right now whose leadership pays me in different ways, loves the transparency, doesn't see it as moonlighting, and does see synergies with all those relationships. So I am definitely getting paid differently than most people. But not there are a lot of people who are consultants that do part-time work. I mean, so it's not that radically different. I think for me, what's different is I'm being transparent with all that leadership and saying, can we also make this a partnership? Like, how can I find a way to make it operate more as one unit rather than 3 separate units that don't really know each other, which is maybe your more traditional consultant does that. And then there's one other interesting example, Connor, that might be true. I'm saying it's very anecdotal, but a friend of mine who's in the artificial intelligence space says, who's going to do the work in AI? And those people in the AI industry, I'll try and keep it layman's.
Yeah.
People in the AI industry, right, for the most part, the people that are investigating this are traditional development IT people. And traditionally, right, we have the way you build something is months, lots of people, salaried employees, offshore, doing a bunch of crazy stuff, and then magically saying, ta-da, here it is.
Yeah.
My friend said one of the new waves around AI, right? So AI is going to really, if you do AI right, you don't need all that, the stuff I just mentioned.
Yeah.
You still need an analyst. You still need a project manager. You still need someone to make sure that the tool is being used right. Well, he says, all right, so forget everybody over 45. And he says, hey, they're all great people, but they're going to be confused by having to work 60 hours to get the job done. That's that culture. Like, okay. And that would be me. I'd be like, but I only worked a few hours. You're going to pay me? You know? He said, and this is, we're not being derogatory here. We're just saying in general mindsets, you know, if you're over 30, right now, what we see a lot is, oh, I got to work more than 40 hours this week. You're stressing me out. There's a little bit of a kind of like I'd rather just like not work as much and can have some work-life balance, right? But I still want a salary and benefits. So I said, well, your pool's gotten really small. Well, who else are we going to hire to do AI work? He said, we're going to hire people under 30 because a lot of them like the game. I'm like, so hang on a second here. Well, you know, so if I said to you, Connor, I'll pay you $3,000 if you get it done in 2 weeks. Connor, if you do it in 2 weeks, I'll pay you $3,000. If you do it in 3 weeks, I'll pay you $2,000. But if it takes you a month, I'll pay you $1,000.
Yep.
Would you be motivated to do it all? And most people who are younger would say, wait a second, $5,000 in 2 weeks, and then I can goof off for the next 2 weeks and play games?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said, really? And well, my grandfather, you know, to me, my grandfather turned over at his grave, right? Me, I'm like, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Do I think the 30 to 45-year-old crowd would be intrigued by that? Yeah. I've got a couple people who are like, well, to be honest with you, I'd be more than happy to work that way, right? It's just that I don't feel like I get compensated for all the effort I put in. So that's why I don't want to work my 40 hours. And that's why thus the stereotype of the 30 to 45 exists. Not everybody's like that. Yeah. So that's a really different way that we could be getting paid, right? If your boss said to you, if you produce in 2 weeks, I'll pay you 1.2 times your pay versus in 3 weeks, which is 1.1, which is in a month, I'm going to pay you 80%. Would you get things done faster, better, cheaper? Probably would. And you can have those 2 weeks off, by the way.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point, like incentivize efficiency. And it also kind of has like a freelancing perspective to it. Like, hey, I finished, like you do, I finished this client's work. I'm on to the next client, or I'm taking some time off and relaxing. Yeah. I think it's interesting. So I think we've had a really good conversation here. I'm going to kind of round us out a bit. And we briefly got into what you do with Fractional C-Suite, but I think the theme of the conversation is like getting to know you as a person and how you think, I think is kind of the best sales pitch you can give. But I think to close out, if you can just remind the audience specifically what you do with Fractional C-Suite, who you work with and where people can find you, I think that'd be a good way to close out.
Oh, that's great, man. Thank you. So Fractional C-Suite means that I serve multiple organizations as a part-time sales and success officer. How they pay me really doesn't matter. It's just that they know that they get value for what they pay me. So leadership understands that it's a financial investment for return on that investment, not any of the traditional ways that we're used to getting paid. The three areas that I'm focusing on are in security in the information technology world, generative AI, which is super cool, and then executive coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And come November, you'll be able to reach me at Fractional C Suite, SWEET.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, Joe, too, I could put your LinkedIn in the description. Once your website's up and running, we'll get out there too. Again, a big reason why I do this is just to learn from other people. So I definitely learned a lot. I want to thank you for your time, and yeah, hey, wish you the best of luck with everything.
It was my pleasure, man, and I so much appreciate you coming into my life from sideways. Like, who knows where and how you came in, but I'm really cool.
100%.
You jumped in there, and I really appreciate you taking the time to make me part of what you're doing. I'm really excited to be associated with all your efforts.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
All right, man.